second layer of the skin, which is called the dermis. And the dermis is basically the largest layer of the skin, and it is made up of mostly connective tissue. So we now know that the epidermis is made up of epithelial tissue, and epithelial tissue, if you remember, does not have a good blood supply. So because it doesn't have a good blood supply, the only way it can get its nutrients is through diffusion from the dermis, because the dermis has all of the blood vessels needed to get that energy or those nutrients to the cells. In the dermis, just like in the epidermis, there are certain types of cells, but they're different types of cells because it's a different type of tissue. So the cell types include fibroblasts, and that should sound familiar from different types of connective tissue, macrophages. There's sometimes these things called mast cells, and then there are white blood cells. And white blood cells are primarily to fight infection. It's your immune system. There are two layers of the dermis. One is called the papillary, and one is the reticular layer. The papillary layer of the dermis gives you your fingerprints. So first of all, it consists of a real or loose connective tissue. It has collagen and elastic fibers. We learned about that last chapter. And it also has these peg-like projections called dermal papillae, and that's what gives you your fingerprints and the different patterns of fingerprints. And then on those dermal papillae, there are capillary loops, which are blood vessel loops, Meissner's corpuscles, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and free nerve endings. So you have nerve endings that are allowing you to feel and touch the world around you, just like your epidermis. The second layer is much thicker than the papillary layer, and it's called the reticular layer. And it accounts for about 80% of the thickness of the skin itself, because the dermis is the thickest layer. And the reticular layer has collagen fibers, and if you remember from the last chapter, collagen is the strongest protein fiber that we have, so it adds strength, and then there are some elastic fibers that allow it to stretch. Underneath the dermis, we have something called a hypodermis, and you'll sometimes see it as the subcutaneous layer. And basically, this is composed of adipose or fat tissue, and then some areolar connective tissue or loose connective tissue that is holding it all together. And this allows us to insulate and cushion our body. Within our skin, we have three different pigments. We talked about melanin. Melanin is the pigment that you find in your skin. We talked about those melanin granules in the last lecture that are protecting your nucleus from UV rays. And they are responsible for your dark skin colors. So the lighter you are, the less melanin you have. The darker you are, the more melanin. And freckles and moles result from just an accumulation of melanin in that one spot. Keratin is a yellow or orange pigment that is most obvious in the hands and the soles of the feet. And that is more of like an orangish. So if you think of keratin, the pigment is found in carrots. People who eat, or especially kids who eat a lot of carrots, can actually start to get kind of a yellowish pigment to their skin. And then finally, hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is it's a protein found in your bloodstream. It's actually attached to your red blood cells, and it helps you carry oxygen. But it does give a reddish pigment, and so that is what when we talked about during that case study where the man is stuck in the desert or lost in the desert. When the blood comes to the surface of the skin, it makes you turn a little bit rosier, pinkish, reddish, but it is attached to the bloodstream.